Well, good day to everyone. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend some time with us here at Manage Engine. And I think we have a pretty good series developed for you. We're actually just starting with a series. We had a webinar yesterday on security, really focusing on monitoring and alerting of changes in Active Directory. And today we're going to continue with security, but we're going to take a totally different approach to the concept of security. And we're going to be talking about your endpoints. A couple of logistics before we get started. This webinar is being recorded. So please keep an eye out for your inbox in the next couple of days. You should be receiving a link to this recording. Please share it with others as well as review it for yourself for any details. Because you're getting a recording, there's no reason to take down any copious notes or anything. You'll be getting all the information that you need in a couple of days. We do have not only myself, but some others working with me on this webinar. There is a group of coworkers working in the background with regard to answering your questions. So please, if you do have any questions, use your GoToWebinar panel and ask them as we go through. They should be answered in line. If for some crazy reason we don't get to all your questions by the end of the webinar, we will be sending you an answer to your question in email afterwards. So I think with that, I do want to give you a brief kind of introduction to who you're listening to. That seems to be important. Again, my name is Derek Melber. I am the Chief Technology Evangelist for the AD Solutions team here at Manage Engine. And I just received a couple of weeks ago my knowledge that I'm an MVP again for another year. So I think this is my 17th MVP, both in Active Directory and group policy. And really the benefit for you of me being an MVP is that you now have a connection into Microsoft, not only into Microsoft, but the entire MVP community. Often when someone sends me a question and I don't know the answer, I go to my friends that are MVPs. They rely on their network of people, as well as just a couple of months ago, I actually tapped the shoulder of a very good friend that works in Intune and got some information for someone else actually in Poland. So please utilize me as a resource. I really try to look at my email all the time and get back to anyone that has questions around Active Directory, group policy, security, really anything Windows. I try to get you answers as soon as possible. We don't have a ton of time together today, so I just want to point you to some different resources that are online. I know that some of you saw this yesterday, so I'm going to try to expedite this, but I think it is important that everybody, especially that's new to the webinars, understand what's available to them. So if you go to our website and you go to support and you go to blogs, you can do searches on different aspects of what we blog about. So for example, let's say that you want to search on security. Yesterday I searched on Active Directory, today security, and you'll see that we talk about data security, we talk about attacks, threats, countermeasures, all this type of thing. So this is a great place for you to come to get small little snippets, usually less than 5 minutes of a read, of information that we post for you. Another resource which I think is absolutely invaluable. Again, if you go back to our main landing page, hover over products in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see this security hardening for Active Directory. Now, the security hardening, if you come down to the bottom there, there are these blue bars. And what I've done is taken 15 plus years of my experience working with auditors and security professionals in Active Directory, and I've organized the security areas for you here. And this is just an amazing resource for you to come, and within literally an hour per topic, you can get all of the insights on how to secure that particular area in your Active Directory, your domain controllers, and your Windows servers. So this is an excellent resource for you. Another resource you'll see throughout our website, we have for you a free copy of our Dummies book on securing privileged access. Securing privileged access will be our final topic in this series on security. So this will give you a kind of a primer to what's going to be going on in that particular webinar that's going to go on in early August. So those are some resources that are available to you. A final resource I want to point out, again, is my email. Please email me with your questions. It's part of my job to answer your questions, and I really thrive on having the ability to help any administrator solve any of the particular problems that they're stumbling against. And I would much rather you email me and we work together to optimize getting you a solution for what you're looking for, instead of you scouring the web and trying to do different things like that. So please take advantage of what is available to you, and please do that. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up, some of our events. We actually have some events. As I mentioned, this is a series on security, and August 6th and 7th, we kind of jump back into Active Directory and we start talking about insider threats as well as privileged access. So we're trying to do a full view on these ideas around security and Active Directory. So please go out to our website, enroll in those. That way you have a reminder in your inbox, in your calendar for that, to come back and see us in early August. We will be at Microsoft Ignite, September 24th through the 28th. So please come to our booth, shake my hand. I'll be there most of the week. Others in our team will be there. I don't know how many. Normally we have 4 to 6 people from the AD team there. Please come and join us. If nothing else, we can maybe show you some cool things, or maybe we can answer some questions for you. A final thing I want to point out is our East Coast User Conference. These user conferences are 2 days, action-packed, amazing information, sharing. We always have some amazing food. We always have a social event on the first night. Just a great venue, great event. I'll be there. Again, most of our team will be there, so please come join us in Chicago in late October. All right, with that taken care of, let's jump into our agenda. Now, let me position what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about your endpoints. Now, when I say endpoint, I'm primarily talking about your workstations, your desktops and your laptops that are running Windows. The reason I want to focus on those is because most attacks today start at your endpoints. So what we want to do is we want to secure your endpoints, and we want to look at a variety of different things that you need to look at to secure your endpoints. Now, in a 45-minute webinar, there is no way to go over every possible thing that you need to secure your endpoints. So what I want to do is I want to talk about a variety of different things, getting you to think about the overall picture of what needs to be done with your endpoints. Now, to start off, I want to talk about the basics. The basics. You need to have the latest operating system with the best security features. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean drop everything and go and get the latest operating system, but based on what you need to protect and what you feel is important, you need to make sure you have the latest operating system to support that. Patch the operating system often. Most attacks come through unpatched areas. The patch is available, but the company didn't patch the desktop. So please, patch often. I know that is easier said than done, and I've been in your shoes. I know that we don't patch for a reason, because you don't want to break anything. But it's this combination of we need to test as fast as possible and push out these patches. Patch your applications often. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record. I don't want to sound like I'm boring, but these are important aspects of your endpoints. If you're struggling with your organization to make sure that these things are patched often, you need to really push to make sure that you get these things in place so that you can test them and get them into place as fast as possible. Make sure that your computers are joined to the domain. If you have endpoints that aren't joined to the domain, it is nearly impossible to secure them, control them, manage them, monitor them, patch them, any of that. So you need to make sure that during whether it's an audit or any other part of your year, you're going to your endpoints and you're verifying that they've joined the domain. This actually can be difficult to do because it's time consuming, but it's important that you do it, okay? The way that I tell most auditors to do this is walk around the environment, physically walk around the environment, and if you see a computer that looks out of sort physically, go test it. Make sure it's joined to the domain. That includes in training rooms, that includes in conference rooms, in the different departments, in the data center, wherever it is. Look for those computers that physically don't look like they belong there and verify those. All right. Now, I also want to give you a concept to think about in the importance of endpoint security. I was going to go add the slide in, but I wanted to just verbalize it instead. Microsoft, a couple of years ago, gave out some information related to some of their research. And according to Microsoft, okay, directly from Microsoft about Active Directory, once one endpoint is compromised, just one endpoint is compromised, it takes no more than 2 days for that attacker to get domain admin credentials. Now think about that. One endpoint compromised, 2 days, domain admin credentials. That is a scary proposition. We must secure our endpoints. Now, what I want to do is I want to go over some of the most important ways or most common ways that attackers actually infiltrate our environments to the endpoint. Again, there are so many different ways to attack our computers. We cannot protect them all, and I can't go over them all in 45 minutes. But certainly I want to go over some of the most common things. First, local accounts, all right? Local accounts and the local SAM on your computers. Now, what I want to do is I want you to try as much as possible as we go through today to give you visuals of what I'm talking about. So this is my endpoint, okay? And if I go over to manage my computer and I go to the local users and groups, this is the list that I'm talking about. This is the local SAM, Security Accounts Manager, on this endpoint. This is what I'm talking about. Administrator, as you see, is one of the default users. We must protect this particular account. Ideally, you want to disable this account. Now, if you are kind of old school and you want this account there because you're using it or whatever, okay, then we need to protect it. You absolutely must protect the local administrator account. Now, you will notice in my environment here that my account is actually disabled. You see the little down arrow here. Now, this particular account is optimally disabled by using group policy. So I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to go into a GPO. I'm going to show you where you can actually disable the local administrator account. I can do it with one setting. A GPO linked to the domain will disable every administrator account, okay? Now, I'll give you some caveats around this. Right here, I can define this and disable the administrator account. Because this GPO is linked to the domain, it will disable the administrator account on every server, every workstation, and it will disable the administrator account inside of Active Directory. Warning, 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 okay? So we don't have time to go over group policy design, but I'm going to assume that most of you understand that all we have to do is carve out the GPO design and the GPO setting deployment to make sure that we're targeting our workstations only, all right? So make sure that you are protecting the local administrator account. If you are going to allow the administrator account to be active, my recommendation is to use LAPS. LAPS stands for Local Administrator Password Solution. It is a free technology from Microsoft that allows you to basically control the local administrator account password on every machine that you target with this and stored in Active Directory. So that means that Active Directory is controlling the password, and at no one time does anyone know the password of any of the administrator accounts. Only administrator in Active Directory can run a command, pull out the password, and then gain access to that computer. So LAPS is a great way for you to protect the local administrator account when you're going to allow this account to be enabled, okay? Now, another thing, don't allow users to log on locally. Here's what I mean by that. If I go back to my desktop, right, here's my desktop, Here's my list of users. You will notice that the only user really is Derek. Here's some tests, right? But those are just there for whatever reason. I would actually delete them in a production environment. But Derek is the only one that can log on locally. That means if I log off here and someone other than Derek tries to log on locally, right? Switch user. So I'm going to point to my Windows 7 computer, Patsy. Patsy cannot log on because there is no local account. This is what I mean by don't allow it. By not allowing it, you do not have any local accounts. You do not want your users to log in locally. The reason, the primary reason, is because when a user logs on locally, they bypass group policy from Active Directory because they never touch Active Directory as the user, okay? All right, if we don't have any local accounts, what do we need to do to make sure that no one logs on locally? It's pretty obvious, right? Track the creation of local accounts. It's simple. One of the things that I stress to all of you on this webinar, don't make security more complicated than it needs to be. If I don't have any local accounts on my desktops, all I have to do to make sure that no one logs on locally is to make sure that no one creates one, and then no one can log on locally. It's really simple logic, okay? Now, what I recommend that you do to make sure that you track this is you get some system in place that can actually track this. Now, over here on my computer, this is my desktop, right? So I'm going to log on as Derek. So this is a domain logon. Derek is a domain admin. I am tracking all of the behavior on this particular machine. And when I track the information, as we went over yesterday, the information goes into your security log on your endpoint. But this security log is a shotgun approach. Every single desktop has a security log. You can't go to all of them. You cannot manage at the endpoint. So what you need is you need a tool that can help you with this. Like AD Audit Plus gives you the ability, I know it says server audit, but in this case, I actually have workstations as well. I can come in here and I can see when users are created. I can come over here, I can go to my workstation, Windows 7, and I can add it in. And I can make sure that over the last however much time, I know if accounts are being created or not, okay? So this is a tool that allows you to see what's happening across all of your endpoints, all right? This is a vital aspect of managing your endpoints for security. Now, if you're thinking that this is too cumbersome, remember, AD Audit is a SIM solution. It deals with event management. All I need to do is set up an alert telling me when a local user is created on any of my desktops. I don't have to rely on reports. I'm going to rely on alerts telling me that, okay? So the idea is that I want to track the creation of local accounts for all of my machines. Important because there shouldn't be any created. The same with your servers, okay? And I know your servers really aren't your endpoint, but you should do the same thing with your servers. No one should be creating local accounts in servers. The servers should be running domain accounts as service accounts, logging in through the domain. Everything should filter through those domain controllers, okay? So with users, you have a lot of work to go over here. Make sure that you protect this, all right? Next, let's talk about passwords. Because we're being attacked through our endpoints and our passwords, we need to make sure that the passwords for local users, if you have any, including administrator, are strong passwords. They're using password policies that are strong. My recommendation is equal or higher to the domain password policy. Now, some of you may be saying, well, Derek, isn't that always the case? No, it's not. It's not always the case. You could have a totally different password policy at your endpoint compared to what you have in the domain. Group policy can control that and make that modification. So here's what you need to do. On your endpoints, right? Not all of them every day, periodically for your endpoints, you need to go to the endpoint and you need to run as an administrator on that machine secpol.msc. Secpol.msc will tell you from that machine, this is my endpoint, what the actual password policy is. See right here? So now mine's kind of botched because I do some other testing and proving some things in other demos, but you need to make sure that your password policy on your endpoints is correct. Do the test. Verify it. Please verify these things, okay? Groups. Make sure that you control the groups on your endpoints, primarily administrators. Now, with regard to administrators, a couple of things to keep in mind. When again, I'm going to be jumping back and forth for the operating system here quite a bit. So, if I come in here, again, I'm going to manage my local SAM. You'll see my groups are here. Here's administrators. By default, domain admins is part of the local administrators. When a computer joins the domain admins group is automatically placed into the local administrators group on that machine. Notice I have some others here. This is not good. This is a bad thing. Now, I have it here for demo purposes, but as you see here, too many people are local administrators. They can log on and they become a local administrator. So a couple of things that we need to do. One, we need a tool in place that's going to allow us to monitor when groups are modified, right? Recently added or removed members from the group. We're primarily worried about added members to the group. So what we want to do is we want to come over here and we want to make sure that we can run reports of when someone is added to or removed from the local administrators group. All these reports that I'm showing you in Adiana Plus can have an alert associated with them. So the idea is that we can go in and we can look at the account management across any of our machines, but we do not want to rely solely on reports. What we want to rely on are alerts. Alerts are more important for us than the reports as administrators. Now, for forensics and for making sure you're compliant and all these other things, great, reports are there. But you guys are administrators, and administrators need real-time information, okay? Now, another thing to keep in mind is you can control your local administrators groups on all of your endpoints by using group policy, okay? Now, inside of group policy, I'm going to show you a couple of different things here. One of them is here called restricted groups. And with restricted groups, you can go in and add administrators, and you can actually control who has membership and administrators. Now, probably what I'm going to suggest you do is use this thing called group policy preferences. And with group policy preferences, you can go in and basically control a group, right, administrators, and you can make sure that the correct members are there, and you can actually wipe out all the others. So if a user for some reason, or an attacker for some reason, adds in a user or group into the local administrators that shouldn't be there, this policy, when refreshed, is going to delete everyone, so it maintains the correct configuration. Now, this is something I'm going to highly encourage that you test on some test computers first, because one of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to destroy the integrity of the local administrators because you have an application that put a user in there or a service account in there and it needs it to be there, because this will wipe it clean. And if you don't have a tool that's telling you the changes, you could be in problem, okay? All right. So that gives us a list of users, groups, and how to deal with passwords on your endpoints to make sure that we have good security. Now, let's move on and talk about credentials. stored / cached credentials. The main issue, by default, desktops store 10 cached credentials. Attackers know this. Attackers, over the last years, I would say 3 to 5, have taken advantage of this by the pass the hash attack. Here's what happens with pass the hash. One endpoint is jeopardized. It's jeopardized at an admin level, okay? Now, the attack is only at the one endpoint. But if that user is an administrator, historically, right, and I'm going to talk about this in just a minute, the attacker can now, as an administrator, go into the local security subsystem on that machine and pull out all of the cached hashes. From there, they can take those hashes and laterally move to other machines up through Active Directory. According to Microsoft, 2 days to get domain admin credentials. So pass the hash is a really bad thing. Couple of things we can do with this. One, we can negate the storage of cached credentials. In order to do this, you can actually do it very easily with group policy. I tell you this right here, right? Computer configuration, Windows settings, security options, network access do not allow storage of the passwords and credentials for network authentication, right? Let me show you where that is. Another thing I'm just going to reiterate over and over again. I want to make sure that I am showing you things in policy so that you know where to go. So in this case, I'm going to go to my security settings, local policies, security options, and then down here, network access. Do not allow the storage of passwords and credentials. The explain text is here, okay? And it tells you have to restart the machine. All the details are here for you, all right? Excellent. So this is a way for you to deny the caching of credentials. Now, everything that you read from Microsoft says this is SSO, single sign-on. Basically, the idea is that Microsoft caches the credentials so that when the user goes to other network resources, they don't have to re-input their credentials. But it's also important for laptop users that roam, like myself. Like next week, I have a 16-hour flight over to the Middle East. So I'm going to have to be on the airplane, but I can't log into my machine without cached credentials. So what I need is I need that combination. So be cautious of mobile users. And also, the idea is that we want to negate attacks. So if the user that's logging on is not a local admin, then there's no admin in the cache, and the lateral movement is worthless. They actually can't even get into the LASS. Let me recap what I'm talking about here. One, pass the hash takes advantage of cached credentials in their hashes. If an attacker gets local admin privileges on an endpoint, they can get all of the cached credentials and laterally move with them if they're an admin. If there's no admin in the cache, they can't laterally move with anything. There's nothing there. So the idea is that we want to use least privilege on all of our endpoints whenever possible. Now, Microsoft, because this was such an issue, starting with Windows 10, came up with a new technology. It's called Credential Guard. It uses virtualization. Microsoft has really pushed this idea of virtualization. So with Windows 10, you can go in and configure, and I show you the exact setting here, that you can enable Credential Guard, and it will now take the entire LSASS and put it in a virtual environment that an administrator doesn't have access to, okay? There are quite a few requirements for this. It's not just, hey, I need Windows 10. Hardware is important. The configuration is important. It has to be a 64-bit operating system. So it's very important that you go through the details, all right? But this is definitely something that Microsoft has added in. So if we go back to the very first thing that I talked about the basics, I said get the latest operating systems to get the new features. This is one of those new features that I was talking about. Make sure you have the right information in place to secure your environments. All right. Now let's talk about the LAN Manager Hash. The LAN Manager Hash is created when a user sets their password. this LAN Manager hash is stored with the user account in the database. Let me show you what one looks like. Now I'm going to come back over here. I actually have a tool that can show you what the hash looks like. So I'm going to launch my tool, and then I'm going to go pull out all of the hashes out of the Active Directory database. Okay, so right here, I'm going to go in, I'm going to remove all of these, and then I'm going to go and add from the local system all of the hashes. And right here's my LAN Manager hash. See that right here? This is what is stored with the user account. So what we want to do is negate the storage of the LAN Manager hash. That's what we're talking about here. Negate it. All right? So we can negate this by going in and making sure the LAN Manager hash is not stored. How do we verify this? We verify this using secpol. Okay? So I'm going to go to my endpoint, right? We're talking about endpoints here. And again, I'm going to run seccpol.msc. Now, running secpol, I go to my local policies, my security options, and about 2/3 of the way down, I see whether or not I store the LAN Manager hash. Do not store the LAN Manager hash is enabled. I'm good. This is how you verify this. Now, this is actually pushed out by policy. Okay, so this setting is pushed out through group policy and Active Directory. I don't need to store the LAN Manager hash. It is not required to actually log on. All right, so if we don't have the LAN Manager hash there, it becomes one less thing that the attacker can exploit and crack. The LAN Manager hash is a very weak hash of the password, right? So with the LAN Manager hash, make sure that you don't allow this to be stored. All right. Don't allow the use of LAN Manager and NTLM. Now, if we go through the list of possible authentication protocols, we have LAN Manager, NTLM, NTLM version 2, and then Kerberos. I'm talking about eliminating LAN Manager and NTLM. The reason, these are legacy protocols built in Windows for Workgroups, Windows 3.11, okay? The only reason you need these is for legacy applications or poorly developed applications that still rely on LAN Manager and NTLM. But if you support these, hackers can easily leverage the weaknesses of these protocols, okay? So my suggestion is that you negate the use of LAN Manager and NTLM on all of your endpoints. Don't allow them to function. I also recommend that you deny Active Directory from using LAN Manager and NTLM. Two different components there. Let me show you how to verify each. First, we are going to go to my endpoint, and at the endpoint, I am going to run secpol. Oops, if I could type. Okay. Now, running secpol, I go to my local policies, security options, and down here, again, about 2/3 of the way, there is a setting that says, where's that? Oh, here it is, LAN Manager Authentication Level. Notice, this is set to refuse LAN Manager and NTLM. Notice that there. Notice it? This is what we want. So my endpoint is not going to allow LAN Manager and NTLM as the authentication protocol for local logons. Okay? This is local logon because this is the authenticating machine. I also have to verify this up here in Active Directory. So I do the same thing. seccpol.msc on a domain controller. I go to my local policies, security options, 2/3 of the way down, and I look at LAN Manager Authentication Level, and you'll see it doesn't say refuse. This is the default in Active Directory, okay? Let me clarify what I'm talking about here. I just went through to my endpoint and I verified that if someone tries to log on to the local SAM, they can't use LAN Manager or NTLM. I then went to my domain controller to make sure that from where anyone is authenticating, including an endpoint, they can't use LAN Manager, but in this case, they can use LAN Manager, okay? Now, can I set this to negate this? Potentially, but remember, I say right here the LAN Manager is for legacy or poorly developed applications. You might have a service running on a server. The service is using a service account, which is a user in Active Directory. If that service only supports NTLM, you have to keep it engaged. So you have to do some testing. Now, my recommendation is that you put in a tool to verify if you're using LAN Manager or NTLM. A great solution for that is a tool like AD Audit Plus. AD Audit Plus allows me to go in and look at logons, okay? I can look at the logon activity and I can determine, let's see, I can determine the logon service. Notice right here, KRB-TGT stands for Kerberos Ticket Granting Ticket. It's Kerberos. As I go down the list, you'll see I don't have anything at this point. However, I can do a search because I'm running a SIM. And in my search, I can actually look for NTLM. And in this case, I don't have any. I can set up alerts to tell me if someone uses NTLM. I can also search for other things, right? So I can come in here, I can go up here, and I can search for LAN Manager. So I want to search for NTLM and LAN Manager and also negotiate if they're negotiating with NTLM v2. So these are things that you can do. And again, I can go back in history, right? If I go back 3 months and I search for LAN Manager and NTLM, let's get me my chart, so it should be up here pretty quick. Come on. Right. My machine is tired today, it appears. Right. So again, I can look at a custom range and I can see what things are. I can clear the search, but you can see I do not have any of the LAN Manager authentications in the last 3 months. You need to go through and you need to monitor for more than a month all of your servers specifically and your domain controllers to see if anyone is using LAN Manager or NTLM. Okay. If they aren't, you can negate it. If they are, you cannot negate LAN Manager and NTLM. You must maintain the integrity of that application or service. You verify if you're using it, supporting it with SecPol, and then you track logons to make sure, okay? Now, I want to track logons for LAN Manager, NTLM, plus I want to track logon attempts from my desktops. Now, this is an important part, and I kind of want to wrap up with this because I've gone full circle here. Remember, I started this conversation talking about the fact that you should not have any users in the local SAM on your endpoints. That does not negate someone from trying to log on locally, right? So if I am at this endpoint and I'm trying to break into this machine and I know that Bill is the domain admin, I can go to this machine and I can try to log on as Bill. I should be capturing this information. I should know when someone attempts to log into a desktop and fail. I need to be able to have alerts for this, okay? I must know this information. This should not happen often. So if I set an alert for it and I get an email telling me that someone tried to log in locally, it is a huge red flag that I am under attack. Does that make sense? Don't make security complicated. Set up the environment correctly. Once the environment is set up correctly, you only need to monitor the environment from that point forward. Those concepts are completely spelled out for you here in this security hardening website. Down here, you'll see that I have local users and groups. These go over those concepts to guide you through what you need to do. I've showed you the concepts. You're going to have the webinar recording. Please, I'm begging you, you need to secure your endpoints. Don't forget the basics that I'm going over here. If you want to get a high-end solution to help protect your endpoints, great. But what I am telling you is, if nothing else, you must protect your endpoints with basic configurations, with configurations that allow you to see what is going on with your endpoints. It is a vital aspect of you securing your environment. So where do you go from here? My suggestion is you go to the security hardening site and you start working down on those lists on your endpoints. 2, you need a tool like AD Audit to track behavior on your endpoints. You potentially have hundreds, thousands, some of you might have tens of thousands of endpoints. You cannot rely on the event viewer per machine to do that. You need a system that's going to allow you to gather those events, and when those events are triggered, email you with the changes. So if you go back to our website, you simply need to go to the main landing page, Products, AD Audit Plus, and download. I challenged the group yesterday. I'm going to challenge you today. From this point, start a timer. Download, install, configure, and get an alert with AD Audit, less than 30 minutes. It's not difficult. It's an easy-to-use tool, but the power is immense with the way the tool is built, okay? So let me give some thanks. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your attention and attending today. Please keep an eye out or go immediately enroll in our October 6th and 7th security webinars. Those also will be jam-packed with information that you can immediately, from the webinar, go do some stuff. I want to thank all of my colleagues for answering the questions as we went through. If, again, for some reason your question wasn't answered, we'll email you. And if you were too shy to ask the question, there's my email. Email me directly. I'd be more than happy to handle your question, okay? So I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank my colleagues for their time and their attention answering your questions. And until the next time I see you, whether it be in a live event or another webinar, this is Derek Melber. And for myself and in the rest of the AD Solutions team, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.